People born in 2000 and later, how does the 90s sound to you? Like a mysterious time of semi-pre-internet that I will never experience. It honestly sounds pretty exciting. A new century was approaching and the world was changing a lot. My kid, born in 2007, just asked me if the 1990s had color. Millennials, we just got lumped in with the people from the black and white photo era. Like teen spirit. Like it happened 30 years ago. I hate that teens now see the 90s the same way I saw the 70s back then. Tired. It's even better than a pillow fight. I say it feels like watching CatDog on the couch, in your PJs, on a day off from school. Like one long summer vacation. Like a mix of synthwave and a Eurobeat. Like it should be about 15 years ago even though I was legit born in 2000, I have no idea how my brain got to feel that way. Like a fucking party. Weird and stuck between time periods. Beige Japanese sedans with foggy headlights. I would love to live in the 90s. I am a huge fan of the rap in that era. Not just the rap, but the hip-hop culture. Baggy jeans and long shirts. I own and wear these hip-hop brands today and I hope they make a comeback and stay forever. I own FUBU, South Pole, Carl Connie, Echo UNLD, Rockaware, Sean Johns, Fat Farm. Before I die, I really do hope that the East Coast Renaissance will rise again. Surprisingly distant, actually. Still feels like 10 years ago, then I stopped to think about how 1990 was 30 years ago. I was born in 97, too young to have really experienced the 90s, so I consider myself a 2000s kid. I kind of view the decade as an analog prototype of the digital era I grew up in. Things were similar but just lower tech. And a lot angstier. I think the double whammy of Columbine and 9/11 made edginess go out of style much faster than it would have otherwise. I was a 90s kid. Original Pokémon craze, Monday Night Wrestling WWF vs WCW Wars, Blockbuster on Friday nights when everybody from your classes were there picking out a movie or video game, Saturday morning cartoons, borrowing games from friends, no cell phones so you either had to use a landline or go over. The internet would crash if someone called. That is something I would say can never be replicated again. It necessarily wasn't all good, but it was definitely a unique experience that no generation going forth will experience. Like Alanis Morissette's You Oughta Know. It's like this weird mix between the 80s and now. Like, I know that's literally what it is, but sometimes they're like, we didn't have a computer, and then it's like, I saw that _____ show back then, but it's like a modern seeming show? I know things that happened in the 60s and 80s, and 70s, but the 90s. No idea. Edit. Wait, like songs. Oh god. It sounds like angst backdropped against Lane Staley and Trent Reznor and smells like Draker Noir wearing huge JNCO jeans or a baby doll dress with docs depending on the mood. All I know is that my parents spent most of it smoking weed and listening to Nirvana. December 1999 baby here, wish I was born in the 80s so I could have lived through the 90s as a teenager haha. A great time to be an innocent kid, but there were terrible things going on in the world as always, e.g. Rwanda, the Balkan Wars, the Troubles. Like the 2000s but with less terrorism and internet. Sounds awesome. I am a metalhead and would love to be in the peak of it. PPL nowadays jolt backwards when I tell them I listen to metal as if it's some horrible thing. Amazing. I'm so pissed I missed them. I'm really grateful for my childhood and the time I grew up in, but damn, if I could choose when to be born I'd probably pick the late 70s. All I have to help me imagine the 80s and 90s is old TV shows, movies, and my parents' stories. My two older sisters are born in the early 90s. I grew and got their clothes. The 90s had an interesting wardrobe. I was born 2000. Bit of an age gap. So to save money, I got their clothes. I was born a few years after 2000, not too many, and I know it is the decade my mom was a teenager, young adult. I always heard stories about the 90s, the fashion and music because my mom grew up a lot during that time. Sounds like Michael Jackson for some reason. Like the song Around the World by ATC. I'm jealous I wasn't able to experience life in the 90s because my parents took too long to conceive me. The fucking 90s were great and they get even better with every year that passes. I graduated in 2001, about 3 months before 9/11. We were raised in, and prepared for, an America that ceases to exist anymore. 9/11 was the first of 3, once-in-a-lifetime, disasters that have happened in my adulthood: 9/11s, recession, pandemic, and this doesn't count the many natural disasters that have occurred. Here we are, 20 years later, and still living under the rule of the idiots who exploited the privilege of being an American so aggressively that they fucked it up for their own children. And they don't even have the decency to relax their grip on power so we can begin reshaping our America, erasing all of their mistakes. The 90s were nirvana, limited internet, cheap gas, and all of the things mentioned above. But most of all, it was hope and belief in America and the great futures we were ready to embark on. I wish the 70-year-olds in DC would bow out, gracefully, and let us finally have it. 2004 here. Always pictured the 90s as this cool, retro vibe kinda time. High school back then seemed pretty lit based on pics, and it must have been cool using flip phones and whatnot. Were they even a thing then? Or like, those boxy white computers IDK. I was 18 in 1990. I moved out at 17 with enough money on my apprentice wage to rent a bedsit. Although I then got hugely into debt, I had a bloody marvelous time. I went to raves every weekend and took a metric fuckton of illegal substances, and listened to truly groundbreaking music. When we weren't raving we would drink and smoke at other friends' flats or go to the pub. It wasn't as cheap to eat out in some respects, but going to a nice restaurant was cheaper. And no bloody internet. For all its convenience, it's absolutely polarized society to the point where there is no middle ground. You are either a Nazi or an Antifa. I used to argue about politics with friends that voted Tory and then drink together anyway. The best thing about the 90s was that after the bland, insipid 80s, with bros and manufactured bands, subculture was cool again. And I had a decent job and enough money to live on. I had a bloody great time. Being GENX is fantastic. Unfortunately, while we were having a good time we didn't notice corporations taking over our political institutions, and for that I am truly sorry. Like a dream. I would kill to have lived in a pre-9/11 era. I was born in the 60s. I have been a music lover my whole life. Believe it or not, I'm not stuck listening to classic rock, like others my age, or the 80s. I listen mostly to new music. The 90s were a funny decade. There was a plethora of pop music that permeated the airwaves, that truly sucked. But there was awesome indie music that was fantastic and now is considered the music of the 90s. Depeche Mode. The decade of 2000s was pretty much devoid of much good pop music, and now 2010 on. The talent has grown back huge, so all you 2000s babies keep putting out that great music now. I'm digging it. A lot better than the 2000s. The world was happier, everything smelled different, and the absence of internet-connected devices in our pockets meant you'd have more meaningful interactions with everyday people. Whenever I smell incense, kick a hack sack or land a kickflip, I'm taken back. Or the 90s. It was a time when for a brief moment it really did feel like we were all getting along. Sounds Like You Can't Touch This by Mick Hammer. Old. The founding era of the memers. Young people in old cars and clothes. It sounds like it was a lot simpler with less distractions, where there was less things than now, but people lived life more fully with the things they had and were introduced to them. Like the vaporwave aesthetic. Like Space Ghost and Savage Garden. You'll never experience AIM or dial-up internet with you mom yelling, "Get off the computer, I have to call your aunt." The 90s to me had weird commercials, most of them looking pretty bad honestly. The internet of that time sounded pretty awesome though, especially with how it would grow towards the end of the decade. I wouldn't have liked to live in the 90s though, especially in my area because it was when there was high crime rates and a lot of anti-Hispanic stuff going on. Although I think I would have been a fan of grunge and ska. Speaking of which, a lot of pop music was either ballads or had acoustic guitars for some reason. I would have enjoyed playing Tony Hawk's Pro Skater on the N64 instead of playing it on a ROM, although we played other games on the 64. Born in '85. Listened to the radio from the boombox in my bedroom, called into radio stations to try and win prizes, and danced my butt off to Mariah Carey, Sheryl Crow, Third Eye Blind, Sixpence None the Richer, Alanis. Those were the days. Oh yeah, and it was a big deal to have my very own phone in my bedroom on the shared family landline. Not too bad but really boring and inconvenient. I always thought the 90s was super trashy. Then I realized that was just my mom, lol. Slightly pretentious, because 90s kids always bring it up, and because my sister is one. On the other hand, I love 90s TV shows and other stuff I grew up with. I was born in 2003.